On this day in history, November 7th, Christopher Columbus concluded his fourth and final voyage back to Spain on November 7, 1504. This journey had been particularly challenging, with Columbus and his crew facing hurricanes, hostile natives, and shipworms that nearly destroyed their vessels. Despite the hardships, this final expedition had explored Central America, including parts of Honduras, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and Panama. The London Gazette published its first issue on November 7, 1665, marking the birth of what would become the oldest surviving journal in existence. Initially called the Oxford Gazette, it was moved to London and renamed when the royal court returned to the capital following a plague outbreak. The publication continues to this day as the official public record and gazette of the British government. The Stoughton Musical Society was established on November 7, 1786, becoming the oldest musical organization in the United States. The society was formed by a group of dedicated musicians in Stoughton, Massachusetts, who wanted to preserve and perform sacred choral music. Their legacy continues today, making them a crucial part of America's musical heritage. The inaugural Melbourne Cup horse race was held in Melbourne, Australia on November 7, 1861. The race, which would become Australia's most prestigious annual thoroughbred horse race, was won by Archer in front of approximately 4,000 spectators. This historic event marked the beginning of what would become known as the race that stops a nation. Political cartoonist Thomas Nast published a cartoon in Harper's Weekly on November 7, 1874, that would forever change American political symbolism. The cartoon featured an elephant representing the Republican Party, marking the first significant use of what would become the party's enduring symbol. Nast's influential illustration helped establish the elephant as the permanent symbol of the Republican Party. The last spike ceremony marked the completion of Canada's first transcontinental railway at Craigalatchie, British Columbia on November 7, 1885. This momentous occasion represented the physical connection of Canada from east to west by rail for the first time. The ceremony, led by Canadian Pacific Railway Director Donald Smith, symbolized the fulfillment of a promise made to British Columbia when it joined Confederation. Railroad engineer Jesus Garcia became a national hero in Mexico through an extraordinary act of sacrifice on November 7, 1907. When he noticed his train's cargo of dynamite had caught fire, Garcia drove the burning train 6 kilometers away from the town of Nacosari de Garcia, saving thousands of lives. He perished in the explosion, but his heroic action earned him the title Hero of Nacosari, and the town was later renamed in his honor. The Wright brothers made aviation history by conducting the first air freight shipment from Dayton to Columbus, Ohio on November 7, 1910. The shipment was commissioned by department store owner Max Morehouse, making him the first customer of air freight service. This pioneering flight demonstrated the commercial potential of aircraft for transporting goods. Jeannette Rankin made history as the first woman elected to the United States Congress on November 7, 1916. A Republican from Montana, Rankin won her seat 4 years before women nationwide earned the right to vote. She would later become the only member of Congress to vote against U.S. participation in both World War I and World War II. The October Revolution, named for the Julian calendar date, saw the Bolsheviks storm the Winter Palace in Petrograd on November 7, 1917. This pivotal event, led by Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky, marked the beginning of communist rule in Russia. The revolution would transform Russia into the Soviet Union and significantly impact world history throughout the 20th century. The Third Battle of Gaza concluded with British forces capturing Gaza from the Ottoman Empire on November 7, 1917. This victory was a crucial moment in the Palestine campaign of World War I. The successful British offensive helped pave the way for the eventual British capture of Jerusalem. The devastating 1918 influenza epidemic reached Western Samoa on November 7, 1918, leading to one of the highest death rates of any Pacific territory. By the end of the year, the disease had claimed 7,542 lives, representing about 20% of the population. The tragedy was exacerbated by poor quarantine decisions made by the colonial administration. Patriarch Tikhon of Moscow issued a decree on November 7, 1920, that would have far-reaching consequences for the Russian Orthodox Church. His decision led to the formation of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, creating a separate jurisdiction for Russian churches abroad. This split was primarily motivated by the need to protect the church from Soviet interference. The Chinese Soviet Republic was proclaimed on November 7, 1931, deliberately choosing the anniversary of the October Revolution. This was the first major attempt by the Communist Party of China to establish an independent state. Though short-lived, it served as a prototype for the future People's Republic of China. The Soviet hospital ship Armenia was sunk by German planes on November 7, 1941, in one of the war's worst maritime disasters. The ship was evacuating refugees and wounded military personnel from Crimean hospitals when it was attacked. Over 5,000 people are estimated to have died in the sinking. Soviet spy Richard Sorge was executed by hanging in Japan on November 7, 1944, along with 34 members of his spy ring. Sorge, a half-Russian, half-German World War I veteran, had provided crucial intelligence to the Soviet Union about German and Japanese military plans. His intelligence about Japan's intentions allowed Stalin to move crucial forces to defend Moscow from the German invasion. Franklin D. Roosevelt achieved something no other U.S. president had done before or since on November 7, 1944. He won an unprecedented fourth term as President of the United States, defeating Republican challenger Thomas E. Dewey. This victory came during the critical final months of World War II, though Roosevelt would die just months later in April 1945. The world's first offshore oil platform, Oil Rocks, Neft-Dashlari, extracted its first oil in the Caspian Sea on November 7, 1949. This pioneering platform was built on metal platforms connected by a network of bridges, creating a veritable city at sea. The facility marked the beginning of offshore oil drilling technology. Carl B. Stokes made history by becoming the first African-American mayor of a major American city when he was elected mayor of Cleveland, Ohio on November 7, 1967. His victory represented a significant milestone in the civil rights movement. Stokes served 2 terms and helped pave the way for other African-American mayors across the country. President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Public Broadcasting Act on November 7, 1967, establishing the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. This legislation laid the groundwork for the creation of PBS and NPR. The act aimed to provide all Americans with access to high-quality educational and cultural programming. Richard Nixon won re-election as president in what was then the largest landslide victory in American presidential history on November 7, 1972. He defeated Democratic challenger George McGovern, winning 49 states. The victory came less than 2 years before Nixon would resign due to the Watergate scandal. Congress overrode President Richard Nixon's veto of the War Powers Resolution on November 7, 1973. This act limited presidential power to wage war without congressional approval. The resolution required presidents to notify Congress within 48 hours of committing armed forces to military action. A bomb exploded inside the United States Capitol on November 7, 1983, causing $250,000 in damage but no injuries. The blast occurred near the Senate chamber after hours. The attack was claimed by the Armed Resistance Unit, protesting U.S. military actions in Grenada and Lebanon. NATO began the command post exercise Able Archer 83 on November 7, 1983, which nearly triggered a nuclear war. The exercise was so realistic that it caused the Soviet Union to place air units in East Germany and Poland on high alert. The incident is considered one of the closest calls during the Cold War. 2 significant racial barriers were broken in American politics on November 7, 1989. Douglas Wilder became the first elected African-American governor in U.S. history by winning the governorship of Virginia, while David Dinkins made history by being elected as New York City's first African-American mayor. These victories marked important milestones in African-American political representation. Mary Robinson was elected as the first female president of Ireland on November 7, 1990. Her election marked a significant shift in Irish politics and society. Robinson would go on to serve as the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights after her presidency. Basketball superstar Magic Johnson shocked the world by announcing he was HIV positive and would retire from the NBA immediately on November 7, 1991. His announcement helped change public perception about HIV/AIDS and brought new attention to the disease. Johnson would later return to basketball briefly and become a prominent HIV/AIDS activist and successful businessman. WIXIC, the student radio station at UNC Chapel Hill, launched the world's first internet radio broadcast on November 7, 1994. This groundbreaking achievement marked the beginning of streaming audio over the internet. The technology would revolutionize how people consume audio content worldwide. DEA agents made a startling discovery in Wamego, Kansas, on November 7, 2000, uncovering one of the largest LSD labs in U.S. history inside a converted missile silo. The lab was capable of producing millions of doses of LSD and was run by William Leonard Pickard and Clyde Apperson. The bust led to an estimated 95% drop in LSD availability in the United States in the following years. Iraq's interim government declared a 60-day state of emergency on November 7, 2004, as U.S. forces began their assault on Fallujah. The operation, known as Operation Phantom Fury, became one of the bloodiest battles of the Iraq War. The offensive aimed to eliminate insurgent control of the city. Armed gunmen and suicide bombers attacked Shamshid TV station in Afghanistan on November 7, 2017. The attack resulted in one security guard's death and wounded 20 others. ISIS claimed responsibility for this assault on press freedom, which demonstrated the ongoing threats to media organizations in conflict zones. Thank you most sincerely for your time and attention. If you found this presentation enlightening, I encourage you to share it with others, express your appreciation with a like, and consider subscribing for future content. I look forward to your company in the next installment.